If you loved seeing justice served today, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more epic real-life stories. Got your own crazy HOA story? Drop it in the comments. We might just feature it in a future video. And remember, when you stand up for what's right, you inspire others to do the same. See you in the next one. The sun was already ruthless by mid-morning, baking the concrete until it shimmered in waves. Somewhere nearby, the sharp whine of an electric saw mixed with the sweet, heavy scent of fresh-cut grass. The neighborhood, usually so calm, buzzed with life. Card tables sprang up like mushrooms after rain, their surfaces cluttered with relics of forgotten basements and dusty garages. I was already running late, a dull throb of urgency pulsing behind my eyes. Keys in one hand, a coffee I hadn't even had a chance to sip in the other, I pushed open my front door and immediately stopped short. My driveway was completely gone. Not gone in the literal sense, but swallowed whole by an explosion of second-hand chaos. Folding tables sagged under mountains of old clothes. Children's toys spilled across the asphalt in lurid plastic drifts. A sun-faded love seat sat tilted awkwardly at the edge like a sentry daring me to object. I blinked, thinking maybe I had stepped into the wrong timeline. Was this a prank? Some bizarre neighborhood event no one had bothered to mention? Then I saw her. A woman, maybe late 40s, maybe just preserved badly by bad decisions and too much spray tan. She wore massive sunglasses that hid most of her face and had a messy bun that sat precariously atop her head like a crown. Hands on hips, she barked orders at a few others arranging items, clearly the queen bee of this whole operation. I stepped cautiously off my porch. "Excuse me," I called, trying to sound more bewildered than hostile. "What's going on here? You're blocking my driveway." The woman turned as if she had just now noticed me, like I was some minor inconvenience she could wave away. She gave a tight, artificial smile. "Oh, hi, we're just setting up a quick yard sale. It's no big deal. You'll still be able to get out. Later." My chest tightened. "Later? I need to leave now," she tutted dismissively, walking over with a bounce in her step that somehow managed to be both cheerful and aggressive. "It's just for a few hours. We have really good traffic right now. Blocking one little driveway isn't hurting anybody. But it's my driveway," I said, voice tightening around the words like they might strangle me. The woman, Karen, because of course she was a Karen, shrugged elaborately. "We all have to make sacrifices for the community, sweetie." A few of her friends, Carbon, copies of her in capri pants and chunky jewelry, giggled from the shade of a pop-up canopy. One even lifted a plastic margarita cup in salute, as if toasting my supposed generosity. "I'm serious," I said, stepping closer. "You need to move your stuff. I have somewhere I need to be." Karen's expression shifted, barely, but enough that the temperature between us dropped 10 degrees. The smile disappeared. In its place, a patronizing tilt of the head, like I was a child refusing to share my toys. "You're being really aggressive right now," she said loudly, voice carrying easily across the tables and junk piles. "There's no reason to be rude about it." I glanced around. Some of the other neighbors were pretending not to watch, but their eyes flicked nervously toward us. Karen had chosen her battlefield well, public, populated, and just ambiguous enough that anyone who didn't know the details might assume I was the unreasonable one. "I'm not being rude," I said, clenching, my fists at my sides. "I'm asking you to move your yard sale off my property so I can leave. That's not unreasonable." She sighed theatrically and turned her back on me, fiddling with a rack of lopsided sundresses. "We'll be done soon. Just be patient. You'll survive." Something inside me snapped, but not in the way Karen probably expected. It wasn't an explosion of shouting or shoving. It was colder, heavier, a steel rod slotting into place along my spine. I knew then that reason would get me nowhere. Karen wasn't just inconsiderate. She was the kind of entitled that thrived on conflict. She wanted me to yell, to create a scene she could twist to her advantage. She wanted to play victim in front of this crowd of half-interested witnesses. Fine. She could have her performance, but I wasn't going to be the villain of her story. I turned without another word and walked back toward my house. Karen's snide. A voice followed me like a mosquito. "Have a blessed day," she chirped, dripping fake sweetness. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because as I stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind me, I already knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. In fact, it was only just getting started. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that made my stomach churn. I stood there for a moment, half in disbelief, half stewing in a simmering pot of rage. My pulse throbbed in my temples, and the absurdity of the situation felt almost like a fever dream. Except that the yard sale monstrosity in front of my driveway wasn't going anywhere. I paced through the living room, dragging a hand over my face, trying to think through the chaos. I could hear Karen's voice floating in through the window, loud, unbothered, rehearsed in its faux cheerfulness. "Everything must go. Come on down, folks. Great deals today." I needed to leave. I had a doctor's appointment, one I'd scheduled weeks ago, and I wasn't about to cancel it because of a self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking as I dialed the non-emergency line for the local police. A woman answered quickly, her tone clipped and professional. "How can I help you?" "My driveway's blocked by a yard sale," I said, my words clipped too. "I've tried to talk to the person running it, but they refuse to move. I need to get out." The woman on the other end paused. "Let me confirm the details and get an officer out to assist." I let out a breath, sinking into the couch. Just a few minutes, I thought. This would be over soon, but those few minutes stretched on, the seconds dragging like tar. I could hear the occasional car pulling into the street, then the sound of Karen, greeting them with a tone that grated on my nerves from the other side of the window. "Hey there, hun. Let me know if you need help with anything." It was clear. She had no intention of letting this go without a fight. When the officer finally arrived, he did not look like someone ready to deal with an entitled suburban yard sale. He was young, too young to be dealing with this kind of nonsense, and his uniform looked crisp, as though he'd just finished a cup of coffee before heading out. His expression softened when he saw me. "Hey, I'm Officer Reynolds. What seems to be the problem?" I explained the situation quickly, outlining how Karen had completely blocked my driveway with her yard sale setup and refused to move. He nodded, rubbing his jaw. "Okay, let's see what we can do." We walked outside together, and I pointed toward the yard sale. Karen was enthusiastically waving at a minivan full of shoppers, her back turned to us. "Ma'am," Officer Reynolds called, and she turned immediately, flashing that overdone smile. "Yes," she chirped. "I'm Officer Reynolds. We need to talk about your sale here." Her smile didn't falter for a second. "Oh, officer, thank goodness you're here. I was just telling this gentleman," she gestured toward me, "how selfish it is for some people to be upset about a yard sale that's good for the whole neighborhood." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "I understand, ma'am, but you're blocking this man's driveway. That's not allowed." Karen's eyes widened, but only just. She quickly regained her composure. "Well, I've been having yard sales here for years. Everyone knows I do this every summer." "And that's fine, ma'am," Reynolds said up, "but you can't block someone's driveway like this. You'll have to move." Karen's smile slipped, but just barely. She flicked her wrist dismissively, sending an exaggerated sigh toward the officer. "You know, I really don't think it's that big of a deal. It's just for a few hours. I'm not causing any harm." I saw her glance toward the crowd she had gathered, her eyes flicking between the officer and me. It was as if she was testing the waters, calculating whether she could still play the victim. Reynolds seemed unamused, though. "I'm afraid it is a big deal. You need to clear the driveway. If you don't, I'll have to issue a citation." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't speak. She simply looked at him, trying to stare him down. There was an edge of defiance there, a woman used to getting what she wanted through sheer force of will. It was the same look she'd given me earlier, the one that said she thought she was in control. It didn't take long for the officer to make his decision. He turned to me. "I'll need you to stay for a few minutes while I sort things out. Don't go anywhere, all right?" I nodded. Reynolds moved closer to Karen, and I heard the low murmur of their conversation, though I couldn't make out the words. Karen's voice, normally so loud and sure, dropped in volume, and I could tell she was trying to negotiate her way out of it. Whatever she said didn't sway Reynolds. I could see her shoulders stiffen with frustration. her fingers tightening around a stack of price tags as if the simple act of organizing her yard sale could make the problem disappear. But it didn't. After a few minutes, Reynolds turned back to me. "She's refusing to move, and I can't make her do it unless I see further violations. You're free to file a complaint, though. It's your call." I tried not to let the disappointment show, but it stung. It was as though Karen had found a way to win, even when the rules were supposed to be on my side. "Thanks," I muttered, turning toward my house. The door felt heavier this time as I opened it, the weight of helplessness sinking into my bones. Inside, I was burning with a quiet rage, replaying every moment over and over. Karen had won this round, but there was no way I was letting her get away with it. I didn't need to think long before I knew what I had to do. It was time to fight smarter. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, the events of the day replaying in my mind like a never-ending loop. Karen's smug face, the way she'd tried to twist the situation, acting like she was doing the world a favor by turning my driveway into her personal shopping mall. But the most infuriating part, how effortlessly she dismissed the authority of Officer Reynolds. She wasn't just disrespecting me, she was flaunting her entitlement like a badge of honor. By morning, my resolve was clear. I wouldn't just let this go. I wasn't going to be a passive bystander in my own life watching her steamroll over me. I needed a plan, a way to hit back, not just out of spite, but to teach her that she couldn't bully her neighbors without consequences. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, scrolling through my phone. It didn't take long before I started seeing Karen's posts, pictures of her yard sale, the cluttered tables filled with used books and bargain clothes. Every caption, every hashtag, dripped with the same brand of smugness she wore in person. Nothing like a big sale to help clear out the clutter. Come down and grab a deal. I clicked on one of the posts and read through the comments. Most of them were people either praising her for her amazing deals or joking about how Karen always had the best sales. There were a few comments from neighbors, tagging each other, making plans to stop by. But something caught my eye, a comment from a local business owner who'd been burned by Karen before. "I can't believe you're still doing this. You've blocked my parking lot more than once for your yard sales. You're a menace to the neighborhood." It was subtle, but it was a hint. Karen had a reputation for this kind of thing. She wasn't just annoying, she was actively causing disruptions, and people were starting to notice. I didn't need to be a detective to figure out the next step. The public humiliation I had been trying to avoid was exactly what Karen needed to feel the consequences of her actions. The trick wasn't just about retaliation. It was about exposing her for what she truly was, someone who thought she could do whatever she wanted without facing any fallout. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. The idea had begun to take shape. All I needed was the right catalyst. The next morning, I set to work. I spent the next few hours crafting a simple, direct message, not too aggressive, but sharp enough to get people talking. I used my phone to snap a few quick shots of her yard. Sale, carefully framing the piles of junk on my driveway, the tables that had spilled into the street. Then I added a few choice words. Is this what our neighborhood has come to? Yard sales blocking driveways, disrupting traffic and completely disregarding property lines? Some people just think they can do whatever they want and get away with it. I'll be reporting this to the HOA, and anyone who cares about keeping our community respectful should be aware. I hesitated only briefly, then hit post. The comments began trickling in almost immediately. At first it was just a few people, agreeing that Karen was being unreasonable. But as the day wore on, the floodgates opened. One by one, neighbors started chiming in. Some had similar stories to share. Karen blocking their driveways for her sales or her loud, intrusive behavior during her events. One person mentioned that Karen had even gotten into a heated argument with a local business owner over a parking spot. As I watched the comments pile up, I felt a twinge of satisfaction. This was more than just getting back at her. It was about turning the narrative. Karen was no longer the charming, well-meaning neighbor with a knack for yard sales. She was becoming the neighborhood pariah. I let the post sit for a few hours, just enough time for the public shaming to take root. Then, I sent a private message to a local news outlet. The story wasn't groundbreaking, But it was sensational, enough to grab attention. Local residents' yard sale blockade sparks outrage in suburban neighborhood. Within an hour, I had a response. "We're interested. Can you send us some details?" I grinned. I didn't wait for the article to go live. Before taking the next step, I had my ammunition ready. Photos, comments, and proof of Karen's ongoing disregard for basic social contracts. I knew she would come after me, try to twist the story into something else. She'd try to play the victim, to make me look like the unreasonable one. But this time she wouldn't have the upper hand. This time I had the truth and the power of the crowd. A few hours later, the article hit the local news website. I didn't know how long Karen had been online, but it didn't take long before her name started showing up in the comments. What's all this? Just trying to make a living, folks. Why is everyone so quick to judge? Not everyone has the privilege of being perfect like you. It was exactly what I expected. She was lashing out, trying to regain some semblance of control over the narrative. But the more she responded, the more she solidified her role as the villain in this story. Then came the next phase. I wasn't done yet. I took to social media once again, this time posting a direct challenge to Karen. I tagged her in the post, making sure it was visible to everyone who had been following the drama. "Karen, I think it's time for you to own up to the fact that you've been disrupting the entire neighborhood for your own gain. You've taken over driveways, blocked streets, and ignored the rules, and it's not okay. What's your excuse?" I didn't need to wait long for her to respond. She came at me, her fingers typing furiously as she tried to keep up her image. But every angry comment she posted only dug her deeper into the hole she was making, and I stood back watching it all unfold, knowing that in the end, the truth would win. The day Karen's downfall arrived, it came with the kind of dramatic flair she never saw coming. I'd been watching her carefully over the past week, tracking every post, every word, and I could feel the tide beginning to turn. But what I hadn't anticipated was how quickly her facade would crack when the news article picked up steam. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the email notification pinged on my phone, the subject line reading, "Breaking, local news investigates yard sale chaos," and quiet suburb. My pulse quickened as I clicked open the email. It was a link to the online article, now widely shared on social media and in neighborhood groups. The headline wasn't kind. Local residents' yard sale disruptions spark growing outrage in neighborhood. As I scrolled through the article, my satisfaction grew. It detailed Karen's actions, quoting neighbors who had suffered from her yard sales for years. The piece painted her as an entitled, disruptive force, someone who believed she could bend the rules without consequence. It was exactly what she deserved. But as satisfying as it was to watch Karen's reputation crumble, it was nothing compared to the real-time reactions unfolding online. People were picking sides, and the more Karen defended herself, the more she sank into a quagmire of her own making. She posted a long, desperate reply on her Facebook page, accusing the reporter of bias and accusing me of starting an online witch hunt to ruin her business. "I'm just trying to make a living," she screamed in bold letters. "This is my livelihood. You can't just ruin someone's business because you don't like them." But it wasn't the accusation that struck me. It was the comments, and not just the ones from neighbors who had grown tired of her antics. No, these were strangers, people who had no stake in the matter, but saw her as just another entitled individual thinking the rules didn't apply to her. "She's blocking driveways." How is that business? Someone should have called the cops months ago. You can't just take over public space because you want a quick buck. By the time Karen realized the full scale of what was happening, it was already too late. Her posts went from defensive to frantic, her words growing sharper, more accusatory. But the damage was done. People were seeing her for who she truly was, a person who thought she could get away with anything because of her entitlement. Then came the final blow. I had been expecting a backlash, but I never imagined it would come so spectacularly. The local HOA, which had long turned a blind eye to Karen's numerous offenses, finally stepped in. The emails started flooding in. People from the neighborhood, people who had never said a word before, were suddenly writing formal complaints, asking for Karen to be held accountable for her behavior. I watched in disbelief as the HOA sent out an official warning to her. detailing the fines she'd accrued for blocking driveways and disrupting the neighborhood's peace. Her response was a mix of rage and disbelief. She posted about it in all caps, lamenting how she was being bullied and how this was all a plot against her. It was as though she thought she could still twist the narrative in her favor, even with the weight of the community and local press pressing down on her. But her arrogance was her downfall. The next evening, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Officer Reynolds standing on my doorstep, his face a little more serious than I remembered. "Hey," he greeted, his voice low. "I just wanted to let you know that Karen's been served with a citation from the HOA. They're fining her for the disruptions and the local news coverage." Well, it wasn't exactly helpful to her. I leaned against the doorframe, trying not to smile. "You don't say," Reynolds nodded. "The whole thing's blown up in her face. Her yard sale business is being shut down for the time being. She's lost her standing in the neighborhood, and now with the fines piling up, I'm not sure how she'll bounce back." There was a pause, and then he added with a small grin, "It's kind of nice to see someone finally stand up to her." I couldn't help but laugh. "You have no idea." I thanked him and closed the door, but even as I turned away, I could hear the faint hum of a police siren in the distance. It was a fitting soundtrack to the fall of Karen's empire. The next few days were a whirlwind of public exposure and personal humiliation for Karen. Her once friendly yard sales were now the subject of mockery on neighborhood forums. Her own Facebook page had become a battleground of comments, with people expressing their disbelief at her behavior. It was clear that the sympathy she once commanded had evaporated, replaced by a simmering resentment that had built up over years of being pushed too far. Her downfall culminated when she was featured in a follow-up piece by the local news. The article was a sobering reminder of the consequences of ignoring the community, filled with images of her attempting to dismantle her yard sale setup with a grimace on her face, while neighbors stood around shaking their heads. And the irony? The piece was framed as a lesson about how even the most seemingly minor actions could spiral into full-blown community outrage. Karen had unknowingly become the face of entitled behavior, a cautionary tale for everyone in the neighborhood. The time Karen's yard sale business was officially shut down by the HOA, she was a laughingstock. She wasn't just the woman who blocked driveways. She was the woman who thought she could bend the rules for her own gain without ever facing consequences. As for me, I couldn't have been more satisfied. Karen had played her hand, and I'd played mine smarter. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving that no one, not even the most entitled neighbor, could get away with treating people like pawns in their game. I was back in control of my driveway, and more importantly, I was back in control of my life. And as for Karen, she had learned the hard way that the community isn't as easy to manipulate as she thought. I leaned back in my chair, finally feeling the weight lift. A small smile tugged at my lips as I remembered the countless comments and memes about Karen's epic fail. It was a satisfying, sweet moment of victory. And maybe, just maybe, I'd take a little time to enjoy the quiet for a while before the next challenge arrived.